Yesterday, oil prices hit another all-time high. Stocks tumbled over worries of production bottlenecks and the world's oil cartel warning that supplies are limited. Now, we all know that oil is bound to run out at some point. Problem is, modern life is built around driving your car to work, taking that bus, flying that plane. Tonight, you'll meet some theorists who believe the era of cheap oil is coming to an end, though they do not agree on what it means for society. Here's reporter Bob Nixon with Peak Oil.
Hi there. Just doing a little routine maintenance on my Chevy Impala here. I call it the Winnipeg Jet. It was my grandfather's car. He bought it in 1966. Looks good. For $3,000. Back in those days, you could get a liter of fuel for 10 cents. Let's go for a spin. Still rides pretty smoothly for a car that's almost 40 years old. And of course, it helps that there's all these paved roads everywhere. And when you think about it, you realize that every street you travel on is part of society's commitment to and dependency upon fossil fuels. Since we began using fossil fuels 150 years ago, the world has consumed 1 trillion barrels of oil. How much is that? Well, that's enough to half fill Lake Winnipeg, the 10th largest lake in the world. Which reminds me, I need a fill-up. We've used so much oil that many people are wondering how much is left. And there's considerable debate about this, but around the world there's a growing movement of people who are sounding the alarm bells. Those people are called the peak oil theorists. $80. Peak oil refers to the moment when the world has used up exactly half of all recoverable oil. For theorists like Victoria's Guy Dauncey, it has enormous psychological and practical importance.
Once we pass peak oil, we're into the second half of the world's oil supply. Now, that might not be a problem, except that our demand is growing all the time. And when you get a growing demand and a diminishing supply, the price goes through the roof. So when you pass peak oil, you're also passing the end of the period of cheap oil. From then on, oil is going to be more and more expensive. Just how expensive? Well, brace yourself. Dauncey has crunched the numbers. Right now, you know, your $1 a litre, you know, you could easily be $5, $10 a litre.
If the gas prices went up to $5 or $10 a litre and just stayed there, what would you do?
What would I do? Have to buy gas.
I think we'd walk more.
I know, it would suck, but what can you do? You have to get gas.
Of course, nobody denies we're using more oil and that it's bound to run out sometime. That's why we search for the stuff in the Arctic and off the coast of Newfoundland, and why there's pressure building to find it off of BC's coast, too. The world is hungry for more oil. Julian Darley, a peak theorist in Vancouver, has crunched the numbers too, and he's not optimistic.
Now we're extracting from the ground somewhere between 80 and 81 million barrels a day, and we're just kind of holding it, and it's just going up a little bit. And the big question is, for how much longer can it be held roughly steady at just over 80 million barrels a day, and how soon will it be before it actually starts to go into a decline that will be permanent?
Peak oil theorists spend a lot of time thinking about when that decline will come. The U.S. Geological Survey claimed a few years ago that the world still has about 7 trillion barrels of oil left, enough to keep cars on the road for another 50 years at least. But the theorists claim that figure is just too optimistic. Even OPEC, that cartel of oil-producing nations, figures there's just 1 trillion barrels remaining. So when could we hit peak oil?
If it could be as soon as next year, 2006, 2007.
Peak oil is not just about whether we'll be able to drive cars in the future. The very food that we eat is highly dependent upon oil. Farm machinery, pesticides, herbicides. In fact, some people say this issue is about survival of the human race itself. Julian Darley suggests we are now slaves to oil dependency. Like civilizations throughout history, ours now teeters on the brink.
When their vital resources, or just one resource, get short, they get into trouble, and sometimes they collapse. It's happened over and over again, and we are dreaming if we think that we're going to be any different from that. Because if our magic oil supply starts to get into trouble, so will the rest of the stuff that it's built on.
But wait, don't start heading to those survival shelters just yet. The peak oil theorists do not all agree the end is near.
You use energy more smartly, use less of it, and we use it more sustainably. And the economy just does an adjustment. There'll be lots of whining. Don't doubt it, lots of whining. But we've always whined. No big deal. Just get on with it, get over it.
Theorist Guy Dauncey says we can be just like the Europeans, who already pay big money for gas. Drive smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. Join car co-ops like they've got in Vancouver and Victoria.
It's just a thing. It's back to when, you know, we stopped riding horses. The horse economy had to adjust pretty quickly. The transport economy will have to adjust.
And here's one more kind of adjustment: solar panels, the kind sold by Victoria's Kevin Pegg. Peak oil for him is good for business.
I don't cry when I'm paying over $1 a litre at the gas pumps. I'm like, right on, right on.
So what's those two, how many watts there?
Dauncey has crunched the numbers and figures we could all drive solar-powered electric cars for less than $500 a year.
So get me right, I can now drive 10,000 miles a year for 20 years for a cost of $9,000.
And why limit it to 20 years?
Well, what's the life of those panels?
Well, those panels have 25-year warranties.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Pegg is a convert to peak oil theory. It's good for business.
Who would base all their energy supply on something that we have no idea what's going to cost us in 5 years, or if there's even going to be any left in 10 years for us? Whereas the sun is going to keep shining.
To a large extent, they're just guesses.
Dreamers, thinks Darley. The world is running out of time.
And what's gone into this multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure is just astonishing. And just to think that we can substitute that out in a great hurry is, I think, is absolutely impossible, and it's absurd.
Nobody really knows how much oil is left to be discovered and whether we'll hit peak oil next year or in 50 years. All we do know is that we face a future of declining oil stocks, and that day could arrive a lot faster than we hope.
We know that the next 5,000 years we will not be using fossil fuels. We know that we will use another kind of energy, and there's enough sustainable energy in the world to do that. The sun shines 2,000 times more energy on the earth every day than we need.
There won't be that number of cars. Agriculture won't be able to use all that oil and gas. It's going to be a very ugly mess. I mean, I can't help thinking of some of the Mad Max films.
Bob Nixon, CBC News, Vancouver.